Hi friends, I'm Chelsea and I'm here with my January reading wrap up. So I read 10 books in the month of January, which was a really good month for me. I listened to 7 audiobooks and read 3 books physically. And I'd say I read a pretty good range of genres. About half of them were fantasy, and then I got some just general fiction in there, along with a mystery thriller and historical romance, which was a first for me. So yeah, I had a good range of genres this month and a really good reading month. So yes, I'm just gonna jump right in and talk through each of my 10 books. So the first book that I read in January was The Many Daughters of Afong. I listened to this on audio from Libby, and yeah, this was an interesting one. I will say it was not my favorite, so not a great start to the month, but yeah, so this one I would say it's kind of hard to classify the genre. It's mostly like contemporary fiction with some historical fiction and like a sci-fi, almost time travel element, which I was not really aware of. I think going into this, I thought this was going to be more like just a contemporary literary fiction about like a family, and yeah, it was not quite what I expected, which I think is kind of why I maybe didn't like it as much as I thought I would. So the book follows many generations of women, starting with Afong, who was actually a real person, and she is said to be the first Chinese woman to have immigrated to America. So it starts with her. I think she immigrated in like the 1800s, early 1800s, and it spans all the way from her story through these generations all the way up to I think like 2040 something, so in the future. And it follows all her generations of women basically, so all in different time frames and different storylines, different characters, all of that. And it features Dorothy, who is in the future in Seattle, and her daughter, she basically realizes that there's a lot of family trauma, and her daughter might have inherited some of that family trauma, and she kind of does like this scientific experiment, and it ends up taking her back through time and kind of like seeing all of these past women, past generations. And yeah, it's, even me telling it now, I'm like, it's just a little convoluted, and for me it was just hard to kind of follow all the different characters, all the different time frames. I was more connected with Dorothy and Greta, who were like the two more modern characters. I did follow their story, but otherwise it just kind of, to me, was a little convoluted. It did cover some good themes, the mistreatment of women and especially minorities. That was kind of an overarching theme, and also it dealt with some like climate change themes in the future. And then also things like family trauma and abuse, and like there were some heavier themes there that were worth exploring. But overall, it just was not for me. I'd say like 2.75 stars. Okay, so moving on, next up I read A Sorcery of Thorns. I listened to this on audio as well, and this one was decent for me. Not a new favorite, but it wasn't bad. So, you know, that's not a great recommendation, but that's kind of how I felt about it. It's a young adult fantasy, and it's about this girl named Elizabeth who has grown up being taught that sorcerers and magic and, you know, all of that is like evil. And she works, or she's in this like magic library, and she is trying to protect all these like ancient texts and stuff. And suddenly there's like these monsters that show up, and she gets involved, and long story short, she gets taken away with a sorcerer who is like her sworn enemy, because, you know, sorcerers are bad. She ends up going with him and his demonic servant, and yeah, she just kind of gets swept up in this whole world and kind of learns some things that she did not know growing up. So it was a fun story. I enjoyed it. Also like a romance element, which to me, I wasn't really sold on the romance. I felt like there wasn't really much like chemistry or tension, or I just didn't really connect with it that much. I enjoyed the characters. Like I enjoyed Elizabeth and Nathaniel, the sorcerer, and his servant, Silas. So yeah, I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the story, I really enjoyed the setting. It was very atmospheric, kind of felt like Hogwarts a little bit. and I thought it was overall a good book, but not like a top new favorite. So I'd say like 3.5 stars. So next up, I read Tress of the Emerald Sea by Sanderson. It's a little faded. This is a well-loved copy that I borrowed. So I think this and another book were tied for my favorite of the month. So yeah, this one I really loved. I wish I owned it and wish that we had gotten the beautiful Kickstarter version. This one is about a girl named Tress who lives on it's called The Rock basically, and she's never really gone out at all. She just kind of has an ordinary life. She collects cups, which is kind of fun. And she has a friend named Charlie who they just kind of are normal, almost like boring people, and he gets taken away, and suddenly she realizes that she's going to be the only one who can save him, so she has to go sail the 7 seas to go meet the sorceress and to save Charlie. So basically it's I've heard that he was inspired by The Princess Bride, but like in reverse. So instead of the prince saving the princess, it's the girl saving the guy, which I love. And yeah, this one was just so fun, so whimsical, cozy, but also like adventurous, and just had tons of like fun twists and turns. I loved the magic system. It was really interesting, and the humor in this was really fun. The narrator was great. There were some really funny, just delightful characters. I loved Tress as the main character. She was just really relatable, I think, but also just like really kind to everyone, really thoughtful, but really smart and determined at the same time. And she was just someone that I really enjoyed following along with throughout the book. And yeah, I highly recommend this if you are kind of trying to get into fantasy and are a little intimidated. This is a great one to start with, but also if you love fantasy and Sanderson, which this is only my second book by him, but yeah, it definitely makes me want to read more of his books. So yes, 5 stars for me. Next, I read The Duchess Deal by Tessa. This was another audiobook, and this is a historical romance, which was my first in this genre officially. So this was my book club read for the month of January. Yeah, this one was really cute, really fun, and I really liked it. So the Duke of Ashbury has one thing that he basically needs to do: produce an heir, because, you know, what else did they have to do back in the day? And suddenly this woman named Emma shows up on his doorstep in a wedding dress, and he's like, "You'll do." Literally, that's how the book starts. So it's kind of a ridiculous premise, but it works somehow. So basically he's like, "Hey, you wanna be my wife and give me an heir?" She's like, "Yeah, I guess," which I'm like, okay. But basically the complication here is that he was in the war and his face is really scarred, and he does not want her to like see his face basically. So he sets these rules for their baby making business, you know, only at night, or only in the dark basically. No romance, no kissing, nothing like that, just like strictly business. And once she's pregnant, like, that's it. And she's like, "All right, no, we are going to have a conversation, we're going to have dinner, and we're going to be able to flirt and have fun, you know. I'm not just gonna show up in the dark to produce a child for you." So yeah, that's the deal basically. And you know, it's a historical romance, so over time they grow to love each other and help each other grow past their insecurities and downfalls and all that. I definitely enjoyed it, even though you can't take it like too seriously, but I thought it was really well done. The audiobook was really fun, and yeah, I just thought their chemistry and their banter was really good. It had me laughing out loud a whole lot, and it was definitely a little steamy, which I guess you should expect for a historical romance. I don't know why I thought it would be just more like a closed door romance, but definitely was not. So it's good to know. I really enjoyed Emma, the main character. I liked how she was like strong-willed and spoke up for herself. I don't know why I was expecting like a dainty little wallflower, just because again it's historical, but I was pleasantly surprised by that. And yeah, I really enjoyed her little friend group, and just all the characters, really. I thought it was really well done, and yeah, I gave it 4 stars. So next up, I read A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I'm sure you've heard of this, or at least the series. So this is fantasy or romantasy, and this is the 5th book in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. And this one follows Nesta, who is Feyre's sister, and it's from her perspective throughout the book. So we get a total perspective shift for this 5th book, and her love interest is Cassian. So yeah, it follows Nesta and Cassian, and Nesta is really dealing with a lot of trauma and just a lot of baggage and difficulties after the war. And I'm not gonna say any spoilers here, but yeah, she's just like not in a good place and really closed off to everyone around her, just angry. Yeah, it's not good. But she is training to be able to fight, and Cassian is the one who is training her. And over time, you know, things happen with them, and she grows. She forms a little friend group, which is really fun. I enjoyed that. And yeah, then there's a whole other fantasy thing going on with like the queens and the whole world and finding all these items and whatnot. Obviously a lot happens because it's a big book, but also felt like it was really just Nesta and Cassian hooking up, you know. So overall, I really like this book, but it was definitely way too smutty for me. It just like ramped up a whole lot from the previous books, so that was not for me. I think that's just not my style. If that's what you like, then that's okay, but not for me. And I also feel like their relationship kind of just got like, it happened really quickly, and for like an enemies to lovers book that's like this long, I feel like there could have been more time for them to like develop as a couple and the romance, and not just like the physical side of things. And yeah, so that part of it was like, I don't know. I really did enjoy like Nesta's character development and growth, and just how she slowly like got over her trauma and opened up to people. And like I said, her little friend group, I enjoyed watching them, and all the fighting and training and all that. And then all the fantasy side of things I enjoyed too. So yeah, I would say this one landed at about like a 4.25 for me. I think I still loved the first or the second and the third book most in the series, and this would probably be my 3rd favorite in the series. So yeah, it was a good book. Not a top fave of the series, but really good in my opinion. Next up, we have another very popular, hyped up fantasy book. This is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I think this is now the 3rd time I've mentioned this series in 3 videos. So yeah, I guess I've been thinking about these a lot lately. So yes, this is fantasy. It also feels more like historical fantasy, romance, mythology. It has a lot of different things going on. And yeah, so this one really feels like it could be set in like World War I, World War II, but with like magic and mythology. So yeah, they're set in like a wartime, and basically Iris, she's the main character. She is a journalist at a popular newspaper, and she is writing to her brother who is off at the war, and she has like a magical typewriter where she just sends letters under this wardrobe and they go out. But she doesn't know that her letters don't go to her brother. They actually go to Roman Kit, her rival, and he starts writing back to her anonymously. So they form this like anonymous pen pal relationship, and she finds out eventually. So they kind of form this relationship through writing, and yeah, I'm not going to say anything else about it after that. But this one was interesting because I think with any like really hyped up book, you're always going to have kind of high expectations, and I think I did with this one. So I did really like it a lot, but I don't think I loved it as much as I had hoped, probably just because of the hype around it. And I don't know, I just kind of felt like the whole time there was like something missing for me. Now that I think back on it, I'm like, maybe I should have read it. So I should say I listened to it on audio. I bought the book after, and I wonder if I would have had a different experience if I read it, because I feel like this book has a lot of very like poetic lyrical passages, especially with all the letters back and forth, and I really enjoyed those. And I feel like if I had maybe read it, I would have had a different experience. I don't know. I like the audiobook, so that wasn't it, but I feel like sometimes you can like appreciate a book more when you're just reading it and moving slower, if that makes sense. So I don't know. I did really enjoy this one. I did wish that there had been more explanation of like the magic and mythology and all that, which there is a second book, which I'm gonna get to. So that was just kind of my feelings on this book. I think it was really good. I definitely recommend it. I really liked Iris and Roman. I will say I feel like their relationship should have been more enemies to lovers, since it is like rivals, really playing up on that. Same thing with Silver Flames. I feel like there could have been more like lead up to their relationship. Once they got together, I was like, all right, I'm on board. But like, I feel like a big part of the romance is like leading up to them getting together, and that could have been more convincing for me. But all that to say, I think I landed on like a 4.25 for this one, so not bad at all. Next up, I read One Italian Summer by Rebecca Serle. I listened to this one on audio. I just happened to own the book, and this was an interesting one because honestly, for like, I don't know, the majority of the book, I was not really enjoying it, thinking it would be like 2 to 3 stars max. And then I got to the last 50 pages, which, yeah, this is a short book. It's like just over 200 pages. So like the last 50 pages, my mind was completely changed. Like I was getting emotional, and things happened in the story that really like made me rethink some things. And I ended up like ultimately enjoying it. So I kind of was confused because I feel like when you're not really convinced about a book for the majority and then you finish it feeling like you liked it, I'm like, I don't know how I would rate this or how, if I would recommend it. So yeah, this one kind of like had me a little confused initially after I finished it. But I do think ultimately that this is like a really impactful book. It just, I don't know. I'm still confused, I guess. I feel like for the majority of the book, like I didn't really like the main character, and I think that's maybe intentional. Like she's kind of going through a hard time and not making good decisions at all. And so there were multiple times where I was like, this girl, like she needs some therapy, she needs some help here. She's just making terrible decisions. And yeah, so I should probably tell you like what the book's about, right? I forgot about that. So it's about a girl named Katie and her mother Carol. They are like best friends, like almost honestly like to a codependent unhealthy level, but you know, they're best friends. And her mom dies and she is trying to figure out how to move on, you know. And they basically have this trip to Italy planned that her mom can't go on, obviously. Katie decides to go on her own. She has a husband at home, but she's not sure how she feels about her marriage at the moment, and so she leaves him home. She goes by herself. While she's there, she somehow meets her mother in the past, so it kind of has like a magical realism time travel element, which was interesting. And yeah, she meets her mom when she was like 20 or 19 maybe, and they basically like become friends while, you know, in a different time. I think the themes of it with like the mother-daughter relationship really hit me hard with where I'm at like in my life right now. I think that's part of what kind of changed for me. Some of those themes were explored more through the end of the book, and some realizations that Katie came to about like her life and her decisions and her relationships. She kind of realized like what she actually wanted in her life after kind of running away from things and like thinking she wanted something different, realizing that maybe she didn't need something different after all. I don't want to spoil it because there are some things that happened that I'm not a fan of. If you've read it, you probably know. But overall, I think this was really well done. The Italy vibes were great. I wanted to be there. And yeah, I think I landed on like a 3.75 for this. Next up, I read The Last Word by Taylor Adams. This is a library copy. So this is a thriller, and I read his other book, No Exit, which I devoured in like a day, I think. So I was really excited about this one, and I think, again, with high expectations, you're usually let down. So this one was not quite the same experience for me. It took me quite some time to read, which part of that is I just don't have as much time to read a physical book, but also I felt like I didn't really like want to keep picking it back up. I was just getting distracted, but I did think it was still really like fast-paced, suspenseful. So I did enjoy that, and I thought it was really interesting. So the premise of this book is the main character, Emma, another Emma, she is living in this like isolated place on the West Coast, and she reads this really bad thriller book, and she writes a 1-star review, and the author basically like hunts her down and asks her to take the review off the internet, and she's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And then things kind of spiral from there. He like shows up at her house and is like threatening to attack her, and it's basically like this cat and mouse, him attacking her, trying to defend herself. She has a dog too, so she's like, don't touch my dog. And she also has a neighbor, so he's like a part of this thing, and she's like, is he bad or good? I don't really know. And this book was interesting because it was written from her perspective in the third person, but then also from the author's perspective, who hunts her down, but as like a manuscript for his next murder book. And like, she's the main character, basically. He's like killing her in the book, so it's kind of interesting, like very meta, and parts of that were cool, but then other parts I was like trying to just keep up with what was happening. It was very like unreliable. Like, he would say something and then she would directly contradict it, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. I guess that's intentional, but I just felt like I had to keep like trying to keep up with what was happening. I think it was definitely an interesting book, but overall it wasn't like a top thriller for me, I guess. I feel like with a thriller, you just want to like keep coming back to it and read it quickly to see what happens, and for me, that wasn't really my experience. But I think someone else would probably enjoy it maybe more and not be as confused by the writing style. So I think I landed on like 3 stars with this one. Next up, we have The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abby Dare, and I listened to this one, but I have the physical copy. So, okay, this was tied with Tress of the Emerald Sea for my favorite book of the month. This was a solid 5-star for me. I just loved the story, the main character, like I was just so attached and like rooting for her. And yeah, this was like a really powerful one that I think everyone should read. I have had it on my shelf for a while, and I'm really glad that I finally got to it. So I think I mentioned it in my first video, but basically this one is about a 14-year-old Nigerian girl named Aduni, and she grows up in this village. She doesn't really have an education. She's trying to get out and get an education and make a better life for herself, but her father sends her off to this old man to be married, and basically he needs money from her bride price, and she just gets sent off against her will, and he's not a good man, so a lot of bad things happen. She manages to get out, but then she gets out into an equally bad situation, pretty much becomes a maid, and it's just not good. Like, lots of abuse, lots of questionable things happening, and she is just trying her best to get out, but like no one is trustworthy, no one helps her until she meets this woman, Tia, and yeah, she basically helps her like learn to read, learn to write, and from there, I'm not going to say anything else. So she is very determined and just wants to like have her own voice and to be able to be a voice for others as well. But it's just like a really hard and heartbreaking journey for her. And yeah, I just like felt all the things. Like, I just wanted her to have the best, and it was just really sad to see all the people who like took advantage of her. So this book took place in 2014, which, reading the synopsis, I would have thought it would have been like way in the past with like the bride price and just the way women were treated, or even young girls were treated. But it's just crazy to think that this is like modern day and stuff like this is still happening. I know it's fictional, but it's just kind of eye-opening to think that like this stuff is still happening in other places in the world. And yeah, it just makes you think like how important education is, especially for women, just for them to have their voice and be able to get out of the cycles that they were born in. So something that was also really interesting about this book was the language style. It took a little bit to get into, but I think it was intentional. So it was written in like broken, non-standard English, basically, and the author, I looked it up, the author said that she wanted to write in that style just to show that, like, even if you don't have an education, like, that doesn't reflect on your intelligence as a person or, you know, your worthiness as a person. Like, Aduni was so smart and like determined and resilient and like not any less worthy. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting that the style of this book was really unique. I haven't really read another book in that like broken English style, but it really just like took you right into her mind, and it was in first person perspective, so I really just was like there with her the whole time. So yes, this was a heavy book, but really good, and yeah, highly recommend. 5 stars. The Girl with the Loud Voice. And the last book I read in January, Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the second book in the Letters of Enchantment duology. So Divine Rivals was first and Ruthless Vows. And I really loved this one. I enjoyed it more than Divine Rivals. Like I said, I liked Divine Rivals a lot. I really liked the complete duology. This book I really enjoyed. I think I landed on like 4.75 stars, so almost a 5 star. And I don't think I can even tell you anything about the synopsis if you haven't read it, because it will spoil it. It like, the first book ends on a cliffhanger and this one just like picks up right there, and it's kind of crazy. But I mean, it's still in the same war setting with the gods, and even more so than the first book. What I liked about this one was that it went a lot more into the magic and the mythology, and you really get more focus on like the gods and just how all that fits in with Iris and Roman and their world. And you get less of the romance because of what's going on in the book. You still have it, and there's still letters and stuff, and it's kind of a reversal with the letters. I again can't say anything, but I'll just say that Iris and Roman do write to each other, but it's reverse. Iris knows who she's writing to, but Roman doesn't, which is kind of fun to me. So yeah, I thought this one was really good. Still the really beautiful writing style, and there were parts that were kind of slow for me, like towards the beginning. It took me a little bit to kind of get into it, but the ending, like the last 100 pages or so, just I like could not put it down. I just had to know, and I was just so invested in these characters, not just the main ones, but like the side characters too. We got a little bit more of their stories, and yeah, it was just, I think this one was really well done, and I think I would rate the overall duology like a 4.5, I guess. So yeah, Ruthless Vows, really loved. I'd say probably my 3rd favorite book of the month. All right, well that is it for my January reading wrap up, and I'm probably going to post a February TBR pretty soon, so look out for that. And if you would like more book videos like this, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.